Hello, very beautiful community. Lots of rumors and comments about whether Vlad has been poisoned by the Kremlin, but also lots of other conspiratorial remarks, one of which we'll consider too, that Vlad faked his stay at the hospital. Now, before we do that, we have to acknowledge how utterly ridiculous I look. But that's the kind of reality we're going to have to deal with, beautiful community. Now, let's take the Kremlin stuff second, and let's take the other conspiratorial remark first. We'll throw an example of it on the screen, saying that basically, I've been at home all along. Now, of course, I could answer this biographically, medically, personally, and point out that I've been through, and I'm still going through a lot, and it's extreme, and it's precarious, and I stayed 21 days in 2 hospitals, and that if any silly commenter like that had even experienced half a day of what I went through, they'd be crying and running to mommy for 3 months nonstop. But that's not the conversation I want to have. The conversation I want to have is about distrust. So I want to make 2 remarks about this comment that I was in fact at home all along instead of being at the hospital, because it raises 2 issues. Now, of course, you might say, well, Vlad, probably raises some psychological issues too for the commenter. And sure, it's hard to write comments like that without having an element of repressed self-loathing. But we don't want to go there. We want to talk about social currents together. There are 2 social currents this comment gives rise to, it expresses. The first is this idea of the diffusion of distrust. Distrust moving from the political realm to other realms. You might say, perhaps illogically, it doesn't follow from the fact that you don't trust politicians that you should stop trusting academic historians, plumbers, and pianists, but that's happening. And the second social current that this comment raises is about what I call passivity / unreality. We consume the world so much through screens these days that we can end up with the impression that what's on the other side of the screen is half real. Now, you might say, well, in this modern, this enchanted age, we think of ourselves as being half real too, but let's not go there today. Let's assume that we feel that we're real, but that what's on the other side of the screen appears to us not real entirely. So the first point about this diffusion of distrust, cascade of distrust, is one that's very familiar with you when you're feeling it. You're feeling that if not you, other citizens around you are progressively losing trust in more and more, rather than fewer and fewer, domains of social and political life. And here I just want to make one remark, because we could have a 45-minute conversation about this issue. And that's that Western democracies delivered an irreparable and needless harm to themselves in the years 2020 till 2022 or so. And that's that they engaged in public health policy that is always a matter of political and social decision, but attributed political and social decisions about policy to the science. Now, notice, a pandemic can come through with a 1 in a million fatality rate or a 99% fatality rate. None of these facts condition what you do about it. That's a social decision. Science doesn't say anything about that, right? If you are sort of want to engage in sort of ludicrous kamikaze self-immolation, sure, you could keep society open with 99% fatality rate. You could also shut it down even if nobody really is affected, except for extremely rare cases. So whatever is the biological truth, no political truth follows from it conceptually. We didn't respect that point sufficiently, to put it mildly. Constantly centrist, technocratic politicians talked about following the science, and even worse, post-truth populists who changed their message from day to day or from minute to minute or just simultaneously gave incompatible messages, as the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson did, who was a post-truth authoritarian populist. These folks also talked about following the science. Boris Johnson was saying Trumpian things about what citizens should and shouldn't do to protect themselves, and saying that he was saying that in the name of science. Boris was saying, wear a mask, but I don't like wearing masks, so they're not really very nice, but you probably should wear them unless you don't want to, and then maybe you don't need to, but you kind of do need to, even though it's not very nice. Well, I don't think it's very nice, but you probably still should wear it. Last Wednesday, I didn't wear one, but other people did, so it was kind of okay. But I enjoyed not wearing it, but it's really good to wear a mask. There's this Trumpian stuff, right? About this is a very small thing, but others are saying it's a big thing. Many people are saying it's a big thing, but strong people, beautiful people have said it's a small thing. It could be very big, but it could be the smallest thing of all. So we're talking about incompatible messaging and then saturation of the information environment with incompatible messaging. And that being tied to the science says. So there was an enormous amount of needless damage that we did to ourselves simply because it served politicians to outsource responsibility like that. There's a lot more to say about this cascade, but that's enough. We will talk about it again, why we are cascading into not trusting, an increasingly big range of domains of expertise and professions. Let's talk about the second thing now that's present in that comment, which is this passivity, whereby you think that the thing that's on the other side of the screen ain't real. In music, professional classical musicians often tell me that's very interesting how, because audiences today grow up in the internet age and once before in the TV age, they're not used to the idea of two-way traffic. So they sit in the concert hall and they don't realize that them fidgeting with pieces of paper or a packet of crisps, or them whispering, or them coughing more than they strictly speaking need to, is actually going to travel not just to other members of the audience, but to the performer on the stage, right? And so that's why sometimes performers feel, I can hear you guys, but you actually can't hear me. This, of course, could have happened 100 years ago, but it's worse today because of this obliviousness. 100 years ago, if people went to a classical recital to hear Edwin Fischer or Alfred Cortot, they would have understood that Edwin and Alfred can hear them if they fidget and make a noise. It's not just one-way traffic. Today, that's harder for people to grasp. The very last concert that Alfred Brendel gave at the Musikverein in 2008, where it was recorded and it turned out to be the greatest recording of Mozart's greatest piano concerto. But as Alfred was coming out onto the stage and Charles Mackay, the conductor, and the Philharmonic already on the stage, the woman next to me got out a very fat notepad and began to fidget with it and draw a Christmas tree. As the music began, she was still drawing the Christmas tree, and I was looking at what was happening. I didn't stop her, but it was apparent that a Christmas shopping list was emerging around the Christmas tree at one of the most remarkable sort of musical events of the century. So we're very bad like that. And the way this works in politics and sort of permeates into music is that we think that the thing on the other side isn't real. We relate to everything we watch, from soap opera to sport to politics, as though it were all soap opera. And we take the things on the other side half serious, as though they were half real. Right? That person who wrote that obviously wouldn't say that if they met me in person for a cup of coffee. But you say it because nothing on the other side is quite real. And that's very dangerous, because democracy is predicated on the idea that we're all in this together. We're sitting at the table of politics. We recognize at a minimum each other's mutual reality, right? But instead we have communication infrastructure whereby we increasingly think that the other people around us aren't even real. Now let's move to the Russia poisoning stuff. I'll tell you in the gossipy way how I think the Kremlin works with these things, But first, let's make a couple of key observations. One is about the systematic conspiratorial prejudice. What does that look like? What it's about? The systematic conspiratorial prejudice is the idea that what really matters explanatorily is the stuff you cannot see. And as compelling and convincing or not what you can see might be, ultimately it can't be of primary importance. What really matters is what's invisible. If something is visible, it's not of primary importance. That's the conspiratorial prejudice. So it's important to be aware of it when we're making speculations like that, what could have happened in this particular case. There's something else that's important to be aware of, and that's that you tend to produce explanations for the average person that come not from the consideration of where is it that I might find the thing I'm looking for, but from the consideration of where is the best lit area for me to look for what I might find. So if you walk into a house with 12 rooms and 2 rooms are illuminated and the others are in the dark, metaphorically, you're going to be much more likely to look in the 2 rooms with the light on. But the problem is that distorts your perception of the relevant balance, right, of where you might get an answer. And so, of course, folks here, and I've got dozens upon dozens of messages about this, were feeling what they know about the misbehavior of the Kremlin and the Kremlin, horrible antics. They don't know much about whatever Vlad seems to be going through with microvascular damage, oxygen offloading crisis in the cells and tissues, which is in fact very common, right? It's a very common, tragically, post-COVID eventuality. In my case, it's post-COVID I got in August, but there's been this bizarre exacerbation just in the last few months that we can't contain or control, which means I still can't sit up properly. I still can't stand for more than 2 seconds without my body going into shock. But anyway, the story I'm going through is much more standardly to be explained along that lane. But if that lane's not illuminated for you, if you don't really know anything about it, then you're going to jump more easily to Kremlin explanation. Well, let me now gossip with you a little bit about how the Kremlin works in terms of taking people out. Well, I think that you need to be addressing a Russian audience in Europe or in Russia, and you need to have an audience of, a significant number, 100,000, 200,000, which we have, but we're not addressing a Russian audience here. Something like half or less, probably less, of my 0.5% of my viewers are Russian, and about 1% are Ukrainian. That's about it. So this is a Western bubble where, quite frankly, Europeans and North Americans are facilitated to have a conversation or listen to this weirdo on the screen who keeps raving on at them like a lunatic. So I think that doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it highly, highly, highly implausible. Now, they are nutters, and they can go after target number 7,000 when they have target number 7 to go after. But nevertheless, I think that putting this into context, that's an implausible form of explanation. However, on the comical side, it took 1 month for my toxicology report to come back. I still think the arsenic isn't back. I think everything else pretty much seems to be back. And yes, I did talk to doctors about it. And yes, it was funny that some doctors were overinvested in that as a possible explanation, partly because of ignorance, quite frankly, about post-COVID damage. But nevertheless, you could rule things out, and so we had a pop at that too. But I never for a moment took that seriously as an explanation. You can't completely rule it out, but it is so implausible because we're a bunch of Westerners. I've never lived in Russia. I've never held a Russian passport. I lived in the Soviet Union, certainly visited Russia, and I certainly have made videos very critical of the Kremlin. but nevertheless, this is a Western conversation. So that's where I'm at on that. Now, I shouldn't jinx myself here, because you just never know. But certainly on this occasion, that's not what we think is happening. Lots of love. I hope this epistemic grounding sort of series that we're by accident sort of getting into. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm just in bed and I have these brief moments where I get hyper and I feel I can deliver a moment for us together. I just do it and I rave on. I'm not sure if we'll continue with this, but I just think it's important. I know fewer people like to view these conversations. People like to view news breaking analysis, but I think this is really, really important. And so it just emphasizes to us that we're the same community. We keep coming back in small numbers to the same room, discussing the same things over and over again, and making ourselves more resilient citizens when misbehaving buggers want to come along and take our democracy away. Goodbye. Lots of love.